Although we made some lovely looking graphics in chapter 14, one of the things we found was we couldn't actually use them to produce useful GUI interfaces because unfortunately we didn't have the ability to tell whether a button had been clicked on by a mouse or if there had been some text typed into a text box and so on. Those missing elements are covered now in chapter 15 in a section on event-driven programming. Chapter 15 also covers animations near the end of the chapter, but the important thing in this chapter, I think, is really the sections on event-driven programming. In a nutshell, event-driven programming is programming that responds to events such as mouse clicks and keyboard keystrokes and entering text in windows and resizing windows and so on. Anything that you do on a GUI can be classed as an event, and you want to be able to capture those events and act upon them, and that's what event-driven programming is all about. Let's go way back for a moment and remember our loan class near the very beginning of the course. It certainly wasn't introduced as a GUI application, but rather it was a console application. We simply received prompts on the console that we responded to by entering values, and then we got a message back that told us what the monthly payment and total payment for our loan was. A graphical user interface, or GUI, would make this a lot more user-friendly. Well, the text boxes you learned about, or text fields, in your chapter 14 already supported the ability to take input, even though we never utilized it. So I don't know if you played around much with some of those demonstrations on your own, but hopefully you did, and you may have noticed that it was possible to click in one of those text fields and to type some text in. Now, your program wasn't able to take that input in and do anything useful with it because you hadn't been taught how to do that yet. But nevertheless, those UI controls, as they're called, have the ability to be able to take text in. So without writing any special code at all, we could populate those different fields in the GUI that you see up in front of you here to contain different values. 4.5, 4, 5,000, and the only event we would have to actually respond to is clicking on the calculate button that you see there. So the idea here is you know enough from chapter 14 to put together what you see physically in that little box marked loan calculator. You can already do that using just the material from chapter 14. The only thing you're lacking is how to respond to a mouse click on the calculator button. And if you could respond to that, your response would be to simply take the values in the first three text fields above, the 4.5, which is the annual interest rate, the 4, which is the number of years, and the 5,000, which is the loan amount, and simply combine those in the calculations that you did already in an earlier chapter when we studied this, and take those results and put them into the text fields marked monthly payment and total payment. So that's one of the things we're going to learn how to do in this chapter. When you write a program that responds to an event like clicking on a button, that's called event-driven programming. Our introduction to event-driven programming is going to be even simpler than the loan class GUI that we outlined on the previous slide. In fact, all we're going to do is have two buttons showing, and we're going to make it so that when an event occurs, namely the event of clicking on the OK button that you see or the cancel button that you see, we're simply going to realize that that event has occurred and print an appropriate message on the console that says either the OK button was clicked or the cancel button was clicked. In this next slide, we see the code, or at least part of the code, that's going to do the job that we discussed in the previous slide. Notice that most of the code is shown in black on this slide, except there's a red section and a purple section in the middle. The black sections we aren't even going to discuss because all of that material comes straight from chapter 14, and by now you're very familiar with what's going on in that code, and there's no need for us to discuss it now. However, there's some new kinds of things happening in the red code and the purple code that we do need to discuss. The code in the red section is going to be what handles clicking on the OK button, and the code in the purple section will handle what happens when we click on the purple button. At least it sets up the mechanism that needs to be in place to handle it. The actual code to handle these events is going to be on the next slide, as you'll see in a moment. Now, in chapter 14, when you learned about buttons, you treated them just as graphic objects, but what you did not realize is they had methods associated with them that you weren't aware of, such as setOnAction. So when we create a button, as we've done in that second last line of code in black at the top, where we say button btok equals new button with label OK, we have a button which actually has the ability to respond to a click. We just need to tell it what to do by using the setOnAction method. And that's what we've done in that second line of red code. We've taken our button, the one that you know and love from chapter 14. You know all about it, you know how it works, but you didn't know there was a setOnAction method associated with it. So we take that button, btok, and we apply the setOnAction method with an argument of handler1. Now handler 1 is something defined in the line above. There's a class that we need to look at on the next slide called OKHandler class that we've written, and we're creating an object of that class called handler1 and setting equal to new OKHandler class. This is the mechanism by which we respond to the click of the OK button using some code that's written in handler1. Now the same story is true for the cancel button. So the cancel button is the same button you're familiar with from chapter 14, except all along there was a setOnAction method that you didn't know existed that could be used with this button. And in a similar way to what I just described in terms of the red code, we have some purple code here which associates handler 2 with button cancel, so that when the cancel button is pushed, the code represented in handler number 2 will execute. Now the rest of the black code on this slide is the same as what we studied in chapter 14, so we won't worry about it. Let's move on to the next slide and see how exactly we've defined these classes and these handlers. On the top of the slide is the handler for the OK button. So we've defined a new class called OKHandler class, and we've said that it implements event handler. As I mentioned earlier, way back at chapter 14's beginning, I said we were going to be using all the theory we learned in chapters 10 through 13 throughout chapters 14, 15, and 16. You're beginning to see that happen already. You've seen it happen throughout chapter 14. It was very important to understand inheritance and the relationship between children and parent classes and so on. And now we're seeing that we have an interface called event handler, and we need our OKHandler class to implement that interface. So that's effectively what we're doing here. And the event handler takes a generic type, and so we're going to give it an action event as the type that it's going to use. There's an abstract function in event handler that we now have to override called handle. And we do that in the next line of code, where we say public void handle action event E. So E represents the event that we're passed when this occurs. We don't do anything in particular with E in this case, but it still has to be there as a placeholder. Within the curly braces which follow, we show the code that we intend to execute every time that button is clicked. And as you can see, our response to that button click is very simple. All we do is print a message on the console that says OK button clicked. Now I won't go through the entire rest of the code on this slide because it's the same story all over again, but with the different button, and as a result a different message. Instead of OK button clicked, it says cancel button clicked instead. It's probably worthwhile to pop out to the Eclipse IDE now and actually try this out to show that it works properly.